I had a client today that I was meeting for the first time, and different clients have, and this was for soul coaching, by the way, and different clients present in different ways. Some people are quite quiet at the beginning and they don't have a whole lot to say or to share, and others are very, very talkative. And this woman was quite talkative. She just seemed to need to share a lot of her stories with me. And as a soul coach, I just try to gauge when to jump in, and sometimes it's very soon on, because the stories are only helpful to a certain extent. And then I personally just want to get on with the soul coaching part of it, to really focus on what's actually going on. So I let her, tell her stories for a while. At some point, I just had to stop her and say, I think I've got enough information for now. What I would like to do is to explore different levels of your experience. And I explained to her that so far what we had spoken about was the stories that she was telling about all of the challenges she had had in her life. I said, so that's one level, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with the stories that you tell. But beneath that level of story is what's actually happening, what actually did happen. That's an important step to take, to recognize that the stories that I tell are not necessarily what actually happened, right? And so, and I could see that clicked for her, like the story she was telling about the people that had been in her life and what they'd done to her and all of that. That was just her story. It wasn't actually what happened. And she didn't really understand what was going on for the other people, or maybe even what was going on for her. So I said, that's part of your experience too, is what actually happened. And then in addition to that, what I'm interested in is the feelings that you're feeling. Because a lot of times the storytelling is just a way to avoid feeling, right? So we touch into a difficult feeling and then we spin out into a story. So oftentimes we'll see people who are challenged, that's what they'll do. They'll stay on the level of the story, right? And so as a soul coach, I try to help people to understand that what actually happened may be different than what they're saying. And it's not that they're wrong or bad, it's just the human mind distorts things to make a story that kind of fits within our comfort level, And then there's what I'm very interested in as a soul coach, because this is really the big doorway into the treasure of the soul. I'm seeing that cave where Aladdin went in and there were all those treasures. It's the emotional body is the doorway in. And most of us have not been taught or modeled emotional connection, emotional maturity, emotional fluidity. And so what I'm finding with most of my clients is my main role is to help them to settle below the level of story and begin to drop into the level of emotion. We've all sort of just automatically, through the way that we've been conditioned and what we've seen the adults in our life do as children, to categorize, either consciously or unconsciously, emotions as being good or bad. And by doing that, we begin to cling to some of them and we begin to reject some of them. And there's a lot of our energy is spent kind of somehow arranging our emotional being so that we can avoid the difficult ones and somehow create the good ones. And that's, of course, how we get into all of our addictions, right? We're avoiding difficult emotions and we're trying to create good, fun, pleasant emotions, right? And of course, this relates a lot to food because most of our not so health supportive food choices are coming from a place of wanting to avoid feeling. So, so the emotions are a really important part of the soul coaching, just modeling for our clients this willingness to listen compassionately, to feel with them. And we'll talk more about this as we go along, and to create a space where all of their feeling states are welcome. And so what I found with my client today, I had to stop her a few times because even when I was asking her how she was feeling, at first she would sort of bounce off the feelings and go back into a new story. And so I just reminded her, I said, it's going to be most helpful for us today to just focus on what's happening right here, right now. And so eventually she got there, and it just unfolded so beautifully. It was like a whole different version of herself came forward. I could feel her voice drop, or hear her voice drop. I could feel her body get more grounded. She had an amazing capacity to connect with herself internally, which I don't think she knew. She had that natural skill. I think a lot of people actually do, because it's inborn, really. I mean, we've had this nervous system our entire lives. We've been feeling our entire lives. So we all do have that capacity to feel deeply, but oftentimes what we need is someone to hold the space for us, right? Because we may not have yet developed the capacity to hold the space for ourselves. So as a soul coach, that's what I'm modeling, is someone who has, one, done the work to hold the space for her own emotions and is still a work in progress, but then can transmit that through my own presence and energy field so that someone sitting across from me is able and willing and feeling safe enough to start dropping into those layers themselves. Because the emotions, as we begin to unpack those, the whole energy field begins to open up. And where the condensed energies and the emotions were clouds that were blocking our capacity to see the guidance that is coming through, pouring through every moment of our day. So as that all opens up, we begin to have access to our deepest wisdom, our deepest understanding, our deepest light, and our authentic guidance.